Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Flight Simulation Association. My name is Evan, the co-founder of Flight Sim Association. Super excited to have you back with us as we are back live on with our webinar series, kicking off the year, really, for Flight Simulation Association webinars with this panel discussion, looking at ways you can move beyond the keyboard and the mouse as you think about how to integrate various means of hardware with your setup. Say hi in the chat wherever you're watching, and I'd love to say hi to you. I'm sure lots of folks out there watching, whether you're watching with us here on Flight Sim Association over on YouTube or listening live on Sky Blue Radio. Great to have you with us this afternoon, and what's going to be a busy day for us here at Flight Sim Association. I'll give you a quick background on us. Like I said, my name is Evan, co-founder of Flight Simulation Association. We're the folks who put on Flight Sim Expo every year, and with the association basically work year-round just to keep that messaging going and help people reach out and learn a little bit more about how they can get into home flight simulation. You can become a member at flightsimassociation.com, and of course our show coming up in June, all the details about that over at flightsimexpo.com. And as I promised, later today we are revealing our 2023 exhibitors. We have our biggest ever reveal. More than 50 confirmed sponsors and exhibitors will be coming up live in about 3 hours from now. So as soon as this is done, I'm just going to grab a quick lunch, and then we'll be up and on the way talking about who is coming out to Flight Sim Expo 2023. But for now, we are here with a great panel of folks talking a little bit more about home flight simulation hardware and how you can interact and integrate it with your various setups. So with that in mind, I'm going to bring the panel up on the screen here with us, and we'll do a couple of introductions, talk a little bit more about what we're doing today. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves maybe as a starting point, and then from there we'll talk a bit more about how the panel is going to go. So Mark, if you want to go first and just tell us a bit about yourself, how you got into home flight simulation, and what brings you here today.
Great, thank you, Evan. So my name is Mark Ellis. I am a retired software professional, and about 10 years ago I was very interested in getting my private pilot's license. But at that time I was working full time, and I had a job that I was traveling nonstop. I was 100,000 miles a year for a big software company, and there was just no way to get the training in. So I decided to get involved with Microsoft Flight Simulator and just kind of thought I could learn, through that. And ultimately I got hooked on flight simulation. Moved from Microsoft Flight Simulator to X-Plane. And then a few years ago, after I retired, I actually had the time to start doing real training. And I currently hold a student certificate and fly for the Upper Valley Flying Club up here in Lebanon, New Hampshire.
Very nice. And Russ?
Well, I had a passion for aviation since I was a kid. I started flying when I was 16 and had most of my ratings at the minimum age. I went to college at Ohio State University, studied aeronautical and astronautical engineering. I always told my kids, don't argue with me, I'm a rocket scientist. Anyway, I also instructed while I was at the university and got commissioned into the Air Force as a second lieutenant. Went to pilot training, got to fly operationally the F4 and the OV-10, about 30 years in the major airlines. Just when I was approaching retirement age, which at that time was 60, they were just raising it to 65. I had to stop flying because of an eye problem. I joked often that I couldn't see going to work, but actually I had a corneal disease, and that's been mostly resolved now due to some really amazing corneal transplants. Anyway, I loved aviation, found flight simming as a way to kind of, dive into that in my inability to fly, and got obsessed with the search for realism in my flight simming. When you know what it really is like, it's hard to be satisfied with the little things that are wrong, and you start working on those. That led me to Air Manager and Sim Innovations. Long story short, somehow they talked me into working for them for about 5 years for free. I was retired. I didn't need the money, and it was really exciting being involved in as they were trying to direct this company. I have an MBA degree, and with my flying knowledge, it was a good fit, and I could help them out. They were getting traction. And then as they became more established, I finally remembered I was retired again, and then I kind of pulled back and have gone more to just looking at other pursuits. Got a few occasional YouTube videos I drop, and I have no official involvement with Sim Innovations now, although as a full disclosure, I do get a $5 royalty on every Knobster they sell. But other than that, I'm not associated with them. But I still love what they're doing. I think it's a great product, and I try to support it whenever I can. And that's where I came up with that crazy title, the Air Manager Evangelist. But thanks, Evan, for inviting me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. So up next, Ron.
Hi, I'm Ron Sartori. I'm an electrical engineer from Purdue with over 50 years experience in computers and semiconductor industry. During my career, I had started and sold 3 high-tech companies and semi-retired in 2019. Always an aviation enthusiast and pilot wannabe. I became hooked on flight simulation back in the 80s with Microsoft's first flight simulator. I'd use it to challenge myself by learning non-GPS navigation, and I've died many times in bad weather ILS approaches. Now semi-retired and not into golf or fishing, I wanted to pursue my passion further and wanted realistic cockpit simulation instruments that weren't part of the scenery display. I started Altimeter Motives to create affordable instrument panels for the flight sim community. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. Thanks you.
Perfect. Thanks for being here. And last but not least, Sebastian.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Sebastian. I'm the creator of Mobi Flight and main contributor also. I'm an aviation enthusiast. I'm a flight sim enthusiast. I myself started, I would say, like 2007 when I really started to fly more regularly in the flight sim and finding my way into also online flying and VATSIM and these kind of things. And I really wanted to, also increase the experience and not having to use a mouse. And I was looking around, and all the options back then, they seemed so incredibly expensive. And I was just kind of getting out of university back then, and I could not really afford it. And since I have a master's degree in computer science, and I also would say that I'm kind of jack of many trades, that I have really, I'm good at building stuff and just learning things. So I started to build it actually for myself, so like the software, and then trying different interfacing boards. And then eventually I got to the point that when Arduinos also became popular, that I said, hey, that's really cool, because I love open source. I really believe in that concept. And that's how I then also decided to use Arduinos and create the software and share it with everyone for free, and make it also accessible, with the hope that there's going to be people who are contributing and helping me collaborating on this. And it took quite a while, I have to say, that I did it actually all by myself. And then when Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 got out, that was really a boost for the community. And I also decided to go to GitHub with my Mobi Flight solution. And that kind of was really also very, very important, because then more people discovered it actually, and also decided to more actively contribute. And I also happen to have the privilege or opportunity to hold some real world pilot licenses. I have a commercial pilot license from the US and a European private pilot license. I fly regularly. And yeah, for me, it's just a lot of fun to develop and continue developing and continue improving Mobi Flight and getting all the good feedback and positive feedback from the community. That's really what motivates me.
Perfect. Well, I think probably what motivates all of us on the panel. And thanks, guys, for being here. So this panel really all came about because FSA captain named RMM, I don't know if you're out there watching today or not, but if you are, hello, basically reached out to me and said, hey, you need to get this Mark guy from X-KeyPad on a webinar. And I said, okay. So I sent Mark an email, and we started chatting, and we thought, what would be interesting for people? And we came up with this concept that, many of us, of course, we started with a basic, mouse and joystick kind of setup. And we thought, okay, how could you take the next step if you wanted to? And so we've looked at 4 different approaches on today's webinar about how you could do that. We're going to start with sort of the most streamlined option, where Mark's going to kick things off. We'll then go on and talk next we'll hear from Russ, talk about Air Manager, how you can use that to effectively create your own panels. Then we'll move into looking at a more complicated hardware setup that you could just buy right off of a website and basically plug in and play. That'll be Ron. And finally, Sebastian will give us what might be the most customizable. I'm not going to say the most complicated, but the most customizable solution. And that's where you're 3D printing it, literally making it for yourself and being able to sort of create the solution that you want. So they're each going to talk for about 5 to 10 minutes, covering those 4 approaches within this kind of progression of how you might go from starting out in hardware integration through to, of course, that fully customizable solution. And then from there, we'll be taking your questions. So please send in your questions in the chat, whether you're watching on YouTube with Sebastian's channel, Mobi Flight, whether you're watching on Russ's YouTube channel, or you're watching with us here at FSA, send it in via the chat. If you post a picture in Discord and you're like, hey, here's my setup, I'll share that on the screen as well. So totally got that ability. Love to see some hellos from everybody. JT, Owen, Michael, Tyler, Keith, Sparkler in VR, Robert, Frank, James, Michael, Chris, and Charles. Good to see all of you. Thanks for being here today. And with that in mind, let's kick things off. Mark, we'll hand things over to you for your little 5 to 10 minute overview here on X-KeyPad and go from there. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Evan. So I'm going to take a few minutes and kind of run you through X-KeyPad. It's one of the 3 products that Stick and Rudder Studio sells. And what X-KeyPad is, it's basically a software driver to interface generic off-the-shelf hardware to X-Plane. And the current devices that we support with the solution is the PI Engineering keyboards, and I'll actually show you images of all of these different devices. I can also interface things with touch screens, and that includes tablets and the Behringer X-Touch Mini MIDI controller, and I'm currently working on adding support for the Elgato Stream Deck devices. And one of the things X-KeyPad offers is a rather sophisticated UI that allows you to create these very dynamic configurations. When you look at these devices, many of them have either LEDs behind the keys, or in the case of the Stream Deck devices, OLED buttons where you can change the images and you can change the text on them. And what this UI, this configuration UI allows you to do in X-KeyPad is drive those configurations based upon data that's in the simulator. You know, is the taxi light on? Is the landing lights on? Are the gear down? You know, what's my next waypoint that I got plugged into the GPS? It also offers a kind of a unique approach with a soft keypad, where if you don't happen to have a device that's got encoders on it, you can simply enter in the numeric values you want entered into the simulator, like the comm frequencies, you know, maybe what you want your altitude setting to be for the autopilot, the vertical speed, heading course, anything that's got a numeric value behind it, you can kind of punch it in the soft, you know, keypad and then enter it into that corresponding simulator piece of data. So that lets you do things like, you know, tune your radios, set up your transponders, all of your autopilot parameters. And the concept behind this is to use generic devices to allow to create configurations for a wide variety of aircraft. I mean, in many cases, some people where they do full cockpit development, that cockpit's very dedicated to a particular type of a plane. The concept here is you can use this off-the-shelf hardware and intermix it and make configurations for a wide variety of aircraft. So here's one of the devices that we support. It's the X-Touch Mini. It's a pretty economical MIDI controller. It goes for about $99 US here in the US. It features a number of rotary encoders on it, which can, you know, pretty much mimic dual rotary encoders within an aircraft. And it has some buttons on it with some yellow LEDs underneath it, okay, that you can program and change. Another approach is these PI Engineering keyboards. These are some really nice looking keyboards with basically you can pop the keycaps off of it and then put underneath it like vellum paper and put legends underneath them. And each of these keys underneath have got a red and a blue LED that you can turn on and off independently based on what's going on in the simulator. You can also create panels. Basically, they're kind of look like you know, keyboards that are in a normal grid layout, and you could put these on either a monitor and use a mouse with it. But the more common thing is you would put them on a touch monitor, or you would run them on a tablet. And each of these keys, you can control the background colors, the text that's on them. They've also got areas on them when you touch them. It's not just a single key. You could touch them on the right or the left or the top or the bottom and get it to behave differently based upon what you're doing. And you can go pretty crazy with these things. The touch monitors, they typically start at around $200 and up. If you happen to use it with a tablet, if you have your own tablet, right now, you can use something like Space Desk, which basically allows you to turn that tablet into a monitor, and that's free. And then there's another product called Duet, which has a very nominal cost on the App Store for using that. The latest device that I'm integrating right now are these Elgato Stream Decks. They're really nice devices. They're keyboards with OLED keys underneath them. So these OLED keys, you can change the image under them. You can put text on them. Very dynamic. And they just came out with this new one that I'm really excited about. It's the one you see there with the 4 rotary encoders on it. And that I think is going to be really great because that's sort of a combination of having something like a touch panel and what you can do with the X-Touch Mini with the rotary encoders on it. And you can also run the Elgato Stream Deck on a mobile device too. And it's a little confusing to me on the mobile. I thought it was free, but then it looks like there's a subscription to it. So I'm not sure how the Elgato Stream Decks on the mobile really is pricing, but you can see the pricing for the other Elgato Stream Deck devices. You can also combine them together. I love that X-Touch Mini. It's a really economical device and the encoders work really great on it. But one of the challenges with it is labeling it. Some people will actually, do paper cutouts and label them that way. But if you have a wide variety of aircraft, you're going to have to make labels for every single one of your configurations you're doing. Here, what I did is I created a virtual device which would run on a monitor that you would put right behind the X-Touch Mini. And that virtual device that you see there is completely configurable. It knows what encoder you're working with, and it can dynamically change. And you'll see this in the demo video in just a minute. As I mentioned, it's got a relatively sophisticated configuration editor. And this lets you do things like control the key image using simulator data. If the taxi lights are on or off, if the transponder is in this mode or that mode, you can change the background images. You can change the text, the font colors. Everything can be dynamically controlled by that simulator data. And then you can also affect, what happens when you turn that knob. If you rotate an encoder to the left or the right, or you push a button, what simulator action do you want to have happen with that? Do I want to, execute a command? Do I want to increment a particular piece of data within the simulator? And this configuration editor really makes it easy, to put together some pretty sophisticated configurations. What I'd like to do now is give you a short demo where I've stitched some of the demo videos together for all the different devices. You'll get a sense of how it all works.
Battery on. Avionics on. COM1 set to 123.6 MHz. COM1 standby set to 125.4 MHz.
So I think that gives you an idea of what you can do with the X-KeyPad. And here's a link if you want more information about what the product's all about. And there's also links on that website to the forums on explain.org where you can interact with a lot of the other users who are using this. Thanks.
Perfect, Mark. Well, thank you very much for that. And if folks have questions about that very short but very detailed intro on X-KeyPad, now's a great time. Leave them in the chat wherever you're watching, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're watching with us on Flight Sim Association. And of course, we'll ask those questions as we wrap things up and head toward the Q&A section at the end. But for now, let's talk about that next step along the integration journey. We send things over to Russ talking about Air Manager. And Russ, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We got
And
you.
then in the next few minutes, I'm going to try to explain what Air Manager is and what it can do to enhance your home flight simulation. At the basic level, you must have missed a slide. Anyway, well, for some reason, this slide didn't come through. At the basic level, what Air Manager does is pretty simple. It allows you to create 2D instrument panels that are displayed on a separate monitor, and they mirror the instrument panel on the sim. And it also provides a realistic way to fly the sim by using controls on the Air Manager panel. The result is a pretty simple and affordable way to add realism to your home cockpit, whether it's a simple cockpit like you see here, or a more complex cockpit, the very most complex. Go ahead with the next slide. It allows you to realistically complete a flight from startup to shutdown using Air Manager's panel inputs. Next. So why would you want a panel monitor? What are some of the advantages? Well, first of all, you can move your eyes and not your head. It allows you to provide a dedicated instrument panel reference regardless of the view that's displayed in the sim. For example, if you're on final, you can just glance your eyes down and see the instruments without having to move your head or pan the view. Also, not having to share the screen real estate between the outside view and the instruments results in a better outside view. And a dedicated panel monitor means that you can have larger instruments displayed, which are more realistically sized. It's also great for maximizing multi-monitor wraparound views in a multi-monitor sim. And if you want a realistic hardware cockpit, the most effective way is to use overlay masks. Next, Air Manager is a perfect way to display instruments, as you see on this LCD screen here, and then covering that monitor with masks that include hardware controls. Next. As you can see, this provides pretty realistic results, and I'm sure Ron will have a lot more to say about this in his presentation. Next slide. Now, this looks like none of the videos are going to work, so that's fine. Yeah, we're having a little trouble here because I couldn't stream this from my computer. Anyway, let me tell you a few details about Air Manager from Sim Innovations. Next slide. First of all, Air Manager runs on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Next. Air Manager panels can run on a monitor connected to the same computer as the sim, or on another computer connected via a local area network, either using wired or Ethernet or Wi-Fi or Ethernet. Also, it can run across operating platforms. For example, if you have an old Mac lying around, you can run an Air Manager panel on it and connect it via your network to a Windows computer running, for example, Microsoft Flight Simulator. Next. You really can use any combination of operating systems that's possible. Next. Air Manager has plugins for all the major sims that you can see here. It also including the new Microsoft Flight Simulator and the new X-Plane 12. You don't have to choose one sim. You can use your panels with various sims. Next. Now, another advantage of Air Manager is that it allows flying without using a mouse or keyboard, like we fly real airplanes. And I have a video that shows how it works here, and we'll see if that comes up. Yeah, here we go. Switches and buttons are easy to operate by just touching the screen, but manipulating knobs is not as straightforward. So here's how it works. You touch a knob and it's highlighted in blue. Then you maintain contact with the screen as you circle the axis of the knob in the direction of the desired turn. There's one problem with this, however. Next. Dual concentric knobs are a little difficult to use with touch. For example, this G530 outer knob has a very narrow band and it's difficult to touch. And in selecting the inner knob, it's easy to accidentally touch the push button function, causing an erroneous result. So we came up with a solution for this. Next slide. And that one's not, well, anyway, it's called the Knobster, and you'll see it hopefully in the next video. It's a dual compact encoder with a push button that you can use, that you can operate every knob on the panel. When you touch a knob or set of knobs, Knobster becomes that knob. And then the Knobster physical knob inputs correlate 1-for-1 with the knobs on the panel, the outer, the inner, and the push button. You really need to try it to understand how useful it is, but everyone who tries it really seems to like it. Next. Here's an example of the realism you can get in a cockpit using Air Manager panels and Knobster. You get most of the benefits of a hardware cockpit for a fraction of the cost, and you're not locked in to a specific airplane type. Now let's look at the progression of how simmers might use Air Manager. As a beginner simmer, you might just want to use one of Air Manager's pre-made panels. Next. Adding a pre-made panel is simple. You just click Add Panel and select the desired panel layout. Any needed instruments are automatically downloaded. You select the desired monitor, then you select the version of the panel, of that panel that you want to use. And then when you're ready, you click Add, and then click Show Panel. The panel loads, is displayed on your monitor, and you're ready to fly. Next. Here are some examples of some pre-made panels just to show their visual quality. Many are free, but there's also some more detailed paid panels available. Now this is the free Cessna 172. Next. This is a paid 172 panel, which costs about 10 euros. Actually, it costs 10 euros. Includes many optional versions, including this dual VOR version. Next. There's a G530, 430 version. Next. There's also a GTN 750 version and a G1000 version. And this picture here shows a deployment of a 2-panel version of the Cessna 172 panel in its sim. Next. A few additional panel examples include this Piper Cherokee PA-28. Next, the Beech Baron. Next, the Cessna 414 Chancellor. Next, the Boeing 737 overhead panel. Next, and a Bell 206 helicopter. And there's many more panels available. Next slide. For intermediate users, you can also lay out your own panels using the many available free instruments. Next. Air Manager currently has almost 1,500 free instruments you can download right from the app. Also, any of the instruments downloaded with the paid panels are also available to use in your custom panel layouts. And the number of free instruments made by the community and Sim Innovations continues to grow weekly as the Air Manager Airbase continues to expand. Next. To create a custom panel, you just select New Panel and choose the blank panel. Then click Add Instruments to open the instrument selection dialog. Then Command click to select a few random instruments. When you're done, you just click Add. And you can reposition and resize and arrange those layouts on a layout window here. And when you're happy with the layout, just once again, you click Show Panel. Panel loads, connects to the sim, and you're ready to fly. Next slide. For more advanced users, Air Manager has powerful tools to create your own instruments. Next. Basically, this involves creating the graphics for your instrument and then writing a Lua code script to manipulate those graphics in response to the changes in the sim. Really, there's no limit to what you can create. Next. And for geek level users, Air Manager offers support for including do-it-yourself hardware into your sim. Air Manager's goal is to enable a complete home cockpit build using a single SIM plugin. Next. The microprocessors supported include Raspberry Pi, the Pi Pico, ESP32, and most of the Arduinos, including the ones shown here. Next. Air Manager supports all these basic hardware components and a lot more, including PWM devices. It even has a hardware message port function that allows Air Manager to interface with custom Arduino sketches and any additional hardware they might support. Next. Air Manager also has a slimmed down companion app called Air Player. It's lean, mean, and can do only one thing, run panels. When you still have to make your panels using Air Manager, and laying them out. But once they are loaded, once they are prepared, you can upload them via LAN to the AirPlayer app. Next, and after that, AirPlayer can run the uploaded panels standalone. And as a startup app, your computer can even load the panels automatically on boot up. It's great for sims that'll be running the same panel all the time. Another advantage is that AirPlayer runs on low performance devices like Windows tablets and Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi can support both video output and hardware, which allows for some very interesting standalone projects. Next. There's also Android and iPad tablet versions of Air Manager. You have to purchase these separately from the respective app stores. Each update of the app includes pre-made panels plus all the current free community instruments that you can use to lay out custom panels. Touch is supported. So if you don't have a touch monitor, you can place key instruments like an autopilot control or a comm stack on the tablet for easy touch use. Next. Here you can see a tablet demo of Android Air Manager. If you already own a tablet, this can be a cost-effective addition to any beginner's sim. Next. There's lots of online support available for Air Manager. Next. The Sim Innovations Wiki is a one-stop reference for all things Air Manager. It's well organized, thorough, and includes downloads of all the software and sim plugins, including demo versions to try. It also includes tons of documentation, reference materials, and tutorials. Plus, there's even forums for official updates and peer-to-peer support. Next. There's also several great Discord supporting Air Manager. Among them is Airman. It's the oldest and a great source of support, instrument sharing, and ideas. Experimental Sim Avionics features info on their innovative super high fidelity panels, and Simstrumentation, which I want to focus a little bit more on now. Now, when Air Manager started, it was X-Plane only. Version 2 added support for FSX and Prepared, but the number of panels and instruments for these sims was lagging. A group of 4 really brilliant Microsoft Flight Simulator users wanted some great Air Manager panels for the new sim, and despite the challenges of the early SDK, they refused to give up. And the result are these fantastic free Air Manager panels for Microsoft Flight Simulator I'm about to show you now. Next. Here is a TBM 930 panel set. Next. And a close-up of the G3000. Then we have a Phoenix A320 single monitor layout. Next, the Cessna CJ4. Next, here's a night version of that. They've got night lighting on many other panels. Next, here's one Evan knows, the Canadair Regional Jet. Next, then we have the Beech Baron G1000 here on 2 monitors. Next, Cessna G1000 2-monitor layout. Next. The Mooney M20 Ovation. Next. Here's a Cessna 414 using the GTNs. Next. The Flight FX Cirrus Vision Jet, one of the new airplanes I really like. Next. And a single monitor version of the Vision Jet. And there's many more great free panels at simstrumentation.com. And these panels are just one example of how user community really helps to make Air Manager great. So from a newbie simmer using an Air Manager for iPad in front of their laptop to the ultimate full cockpit build like you see here, in my opinion, Air Manager is definitely something you should look at for your home simulator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Russ. And I know we had to work through some tech challenges there, but I think we managed to make it work. So well done. And again,
right.
You're covering a huge amount of tech in about 10 minutes. So definitely something we could spend another whole session on. And of course, your YouTube channel is a great place for folks to go and learn more about that. But let's talk now about commercially available setups. So if this stuff is seeming like it's a bit too over the top for you, and you're thinking, well, how do I get, some kind of a hardware solution that I can purchase off the shelf? Ron is going to take us through all that. So Ron, I pass things over to you.
Thank you. I'll talk a little bit about how Altimeter Motives got started. I wanted more realism with my simulations, and I wanted an instrument panel. I'm kind of big into learning the instruments, and I wanted a different screen than the scenery screen. One of the advantages of that is you want the instrument panel where it would physically be away from you, and the scenery would be a little farther out, so your eye changes focal distance. Our first product was just a blank acrylic cut panel where you could populate it with instruments from third parties like TRC sim kits or Flight Illusion and the like. And you can see one panel right here. It's One of the things, the difference between Air Manager and a physical real panel is oftentimes the yoke wants to be right in the middle of the monitor, which is physically, so you have to compromise where the yoke is. Here's a setup where with the Altimeter Motives 172 Gen 2 panel with a right side panel with real sim gear equipment and some prop wash simulations equipment. And you can see that we've got the yoke and the throttle quadrants underneath. And to do that nicely, you want to have a VISA mount so that it supports above and you don't have to have the yoke way too far in front of you. And here it is flying. You get the sensation. If you set the screen right on the scenery, you can have the wet compass sitting right above, and you'll see that. All right, and here's another close-up of. This is kind of like the knobster, except that there's a bunch of knobsters. There's one for each of the instruments. And by the way, at the last Flight Sim Expo, people would come up to our display and they would go, whose instruments are those? Well, they weren't physical instruments. They were illusions from a display monitor behind it, but they can look quite real, particularly when you have the proper bezel and the screw heads and everything, and you have it very close to the physical panel. Here's a dual G5 version of the same cockpit. We offer that as well. And all the knobs work, and it's quite realistic, particularly because the sceneries, you can have the 3-screen sceneries and still have the physical instruments right there in front of you. We're just coming out now, and it'll be available early April, is Baron 55, and here's a physical picture of the prototype. And you can see it's quite loaded up with instruments. Here's a little video of it where you can change the source for the HSI instrument for navigation source. And then there's a DME display at the very bottom that you'll see in a second here. And you can change the source for that. And the challenge for us is to make it very thin, so that you have a wide angle view on the monitor. So if you're making your own, which I really encourage you to do, and make your own instruments, that's for the hardcore folks. We've done that. I've done that personally, is what the panel material is. If you do wood, the frustrating thing about it is painting it and not seeing the wood grain, because that kind of takes away from the realism a little bit. And then to add the lettering, one of the tricks in adding lettering, if you laser engrave it, you can paint it, and the paint will fill the burnout areas that the laser made. And then you, after paint dries, you peel it, and you've got engraved painted lettering, and you scrape off the little sticky parts that are inside of the characters. But the real ultimate way to do it is, instead of a silk screen, is to use ultraviolet printing. We go to a professional printer to make these, and they're just beautiful. They do an ultraviolet printer on from a sign making company, and then we cover it with a clear coat to protect the letters from being scraped off. But when you do warning labels, we got caught on this, is that we imitated a poster for the C-172. And there was a typo in the poster. They had it copyrighted, so they own that spelling. And meteorological has 3 O's, and they didn't. And we copied that, and we had, there's a number of collector items panels we made that have it misspelled. Now, making your own instruments, a lot of attention to that. A lot of it, you can always go to a fellow college student, Captain Bob Sim, who works closely with Sebastian on Mobi Flight, making your own instruments. This is one I made, and to get it to look nice, there's some tricks. One of them I used was use some glossy adhesive to print your labels on a laser printer, and then you cut it out and use the laser to make it nice and clean cut. But they can look quite nice. this is the attitude indicator, and the acrylic, we cut acrylic for the lens of that, which has a nice effect because it gives you a little bit of glare, what makes it look like a real instrument. From a mechanical standpoint, it's quite complex, so spend a little time on that. Mechanical engineering, if you're making your own, you're going to spend a lot of time doing mechanical engineering. I self-taught myself with Fusion 360, and there's some excellent videos on YouTube on learning that. It's free for the home hobbyist, and it costs about $500 a year if you're a commercial user. But there's an example of the involvement of making just one instrument, where you have all the mechanical designs of all the different gears, stepper motors, etc. And we'll go to this, but here it is. Well, let's start this thing again here. To watch a video of it. And it's like making a clock, a special clock. And by the way, this is being operated by Mobi Flight to do the testing of it. But you can see it's quite an interesting thing. It's a lot of fun to do, by the way. And I really encourage people, if you have the knack and inclination, it's a great thing to try to do yourself. But you see that thing go. They have a nice thing on Mobi Flight. There's a test operation where you can, run your designs. And then artistry is how to make a thing look pretty. And here's a technique I recommend: is if you do 2 layers for your instrument. If you do if you use one of those transparency slides and you print it in reverse on the back, and the shiny side will stay shiny. And so it's you've done it on the reverse, and then you have to backline it because you can't print white on white paper or on a transparency. So what you do is you make a duplicate copy of the same size, and you layer it. And if you get them perfectly aligned, they look beautiful. And here's an example that, why did it go back here? Sorry. So here's an example of one such one. This was a fellow in France, and you can go look it up. There's a YouTube video. He makes these things, and it's backlit. Look for the video, Generic Gauge Development Kit, and he'll go into the details of that. Here's one I made for an engine instrument, and it uses the same technique. I actually own this. This was the one I bought and built. And then you can backlight it if you put something behind it. The challenge is to make the white paper that is creating the black to make it purely opaque. And this was with the laser printer. If you use an inkjet, I think it gets a little bit more opaque. And then after you build all your instruments, these are ones I built when I was getting started. You've got all these things to connect up, and Mobi Flight is the go-to thing to make motors go and such. As Air Manager takes inputs well, Air Manager, I don't know if it makes any outputs. Mobi Flight handles outputs and inputs. And then when you're all done, you've got to wire it up, and that can be a big job. For our panels that we sell, we use a printed circuit board, and they can be a real challenge mechanically to route everything. It's a simple circuit, but you have to step around all the windows, and you want to make it very, very flat. This happens to have a Raspberry Pico Pi actually on the printed circuit board. Our other ones have a disconnected controller with a connector. And then to make it really look good, 3D printing is one way to make your bezels, but 3D printing bezels are very somewhat crude compared to doing it professionally. We sprung some money, and it's quite a bit actually, to make injection molded ones. And the injection molded ones can be very thin. They hold the encoders, whatnot. And this is silk screened on the Davtron clock. So you've got those type of options. We provide that in a completed panel. And as anything, there's all sorts of compromises, trade-offs, and concessions you have to make. And one of the biggest concessions with our panels is the yoke can't go through the monitor for the Air Manager display. And by the way, on our Gen 2 panel, it comes with a dedicated version of Air Manager that will work with the standard Air Manager as well. And along with it. And there's that saying, perfect is the enemy of good, but you can always get better. So thank you very much, and see us at booth H20 at the Flight Sim Expo.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate that. And of course, if you have questions for Ron, leave them in the chat, and I will do my best to ask those as we go into our Q&A segment. But before that, we hand things over to Sebastian talking about the most customizable of the options, which is literally printing it and doing it yourself. Sebastian, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, it was really nice listening to everyone else introducing their like projects or products, and a lot of similarities, of course, that really connects us with each other, because we're trying to solve the same kind of problems, or trying to create just similar things. So that was really nice to see. And okay, with MobiFlight, what exactly does MobiFlight do? Yeah, maybe some of you guys are asking this, and this came up before. In first place, we really want to get rid of the mouse. Yeah, so this is something that is so it just breaks the immersion so badly when you're on Final Approach and you're trying to dial in something or correct for something, and then you have to use the mouse. You get disoriented. And MobiFlight helps you with that. So MobiFlight is really the connecting piece between where we have physical hardware on the one hand side and your favorite flight sim on the other side. And flight sims can be Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. So in fact, MobiFlight was one of the first ones really supporting Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 by introducing and also sharing with the community something called the MobiFlight WASM module, which is actually also used by many other open source projects, and we also support X-Plane, and we also support FSX and Prepare 3D. And on the other side, you have these actual real-world devices, right, where you have buttons and switches, some things that you want to make an input to the sim. So basically, you flip a switch, you create a signal, MobiFlight picks it up, and then you can configure that something happens inside the sim. So there's this way from the input side, and then there's also MobiFlight helps you with getting access to all the aircraft state, basically. So you can read values from the sim, and you can convert those, and you can also then display these values or this information in very different forms. So it could be like super simple with an LED, as we see it here with the master caution switch, which is simply just the light. But it could also be 7-segment displays, as you know it from the radios. It could be stepper motors, as we just learned here, that you can drive your gauges with. Could be LCD screens, which allow a little bit for more flexibility and data density on one device, and could be servos. And just like you have this combination of input and outputs, and that is really probably also unique to MobiFlight and really easy to configure. So what do people do with this? Yeah, so you don't have to be a software engineer. You don't have to be a mechanical engineer. You can really start very simple. And most of the MobiFlight users, they start out with a panel like this, where you have a set of switches, but also a couple of LEDs. So this one here is obviously an A320 light panel with the APU combined. That is really nice and super simple to start with. And then, you can also combine those custom devices that you create for yourself with MobiFlight. You can put that in the context of everything else that you might already have, whether that is instrument panels. I'm not sure if this is an Air Manager panel. I'm not sure, but yeah, there might also be some other off-the-shelf modules that you bought, or that's really something that you can also do very, very nicely with MobiFlight. And then it's also really up to you. So MobiFlight does not come with kind of MobiFlight is very flexible. You can configure and build whatever you want. So you can either go down the route where you say, hey, I want to build something aircraft specific, or maybe type specific. In this case, that's my radio stack for general aviation airplane. Or you might want to go for more like something Boeing 737 related. So yeah, this is all the flexibility, and it's up to your creativity what you want to go for. Then we also have people who say, well, I fly different types of aircraft, so I want to have it more generically solved for me. So I built a panel that I can use for many different types. And you can see in this one, I really love that picture because you can see these, it does all the different devices. And every one of us has their kind of access to tools and skills and experience, and it's so nice that also you don't have to start everyone can start building with MobiFlight, and you learn on the go. So you learn while you're building, and building really becomes the second hobby inside of the flight simulator hobby. Not only flying but building. And I think it's probably true to say that many of us are building and not flying. It's like the model train builders, they don't run their trains, they always build on their tracks. And then we also, what is really, really cool these days is that we have this access at home, access to these sophisticated tools. I compare this to 10 years ago. There were no laser cutters in our homes. There were no 3D printers so commonly available. They were kind of like expensive and whatnot. And now everything is so achievable and accessible. And if you have the right skills or the time and the dedication, then this is what the community builds. Yeah. And what is also really, really cool about this is that the community does not only build these cool things, they also share it. And community is a very, very important factor for Mobi Flight, and I believe also for its success, because the community is very, very active and collaborating and contributing and sharing their designs and experience. And then, I mean, look at this, that's the high fidelity. You cannot really make out that this is not a bot or maybe even an original piece of aviation instrument. So that's really, really cool. And you might already also know Carl. I'm very, very proud that also we can use this picture to really showcase that that MobiFly scales very well. So you can build simple small panels with switches, and it goes all the way up to a full cockpit replica of a Boeing 737. You all know Carl, 737 DYI sim, and he's sharing also his designs, and it's super cool what he does. And talking about the hardware behind this that is driven by MobiFlight, yeah, he has over 30 boards, IO boards connected to make all this work. But it's just so cool. And the MobiFlight community, I'm really, really proud of that this has come and grown so far. So this is a picture which is made possible because of the community feedback program, that people can participate and share a little bit of their usage data. So at least I also have some idea of, wow, MobiFlight community is all over the world. It's all also, you can tell on the Discord, there's always people online and interacting with each other, and that's really cool. And that also brings me to this to the different touch points where you can become part of the MobiFlight community or involve yourself in the MobiFlight community. So we have on the one hand side GitHub, where all the code, so I didn't emphasize that so much, but all the code of MobiFlight, the code base is open, public, open source. Everyone has access to it. We have great documentation, which is also something where the community collaborates on, which is a huge help for me because I'm all doing this in my free time. It's not like that I really have a commercial advantage to this through this project or income or something. So this is really, really nice. Then we have the YouTube community with the tutorials. And sorry, on the GitHub, we also have the designs that I already mentioned, where we're collecting some, for different types of aircrafts. We share this with each other, and people don't have to start from scratch designing. So because I think it was you, Ron, who also mentioned, yeah, it's kind of mechanical design and illustrations for the decals and all these kind of things that not everybody can come up with these skills, and you don't have to have them because you sometimes can just reuse what others have designed before. And then we have YouTube with the tutorials. And also I really want to make a big shout out to Captain Bob, who is also providing a lot of cool content on his channel, and everyone else who is putting out kind of these tutorials around Mobi Flight. That really helps me that not everything is just on me, and it just scales better. And that was so nice to see that everyone is so engaged. And then we have HubHop, which is actually also a really, really cool project that spun off Mobi Flight. So also a community idea. It's a database for presets where we are collecting all the presets that get you started really, really quickly with configuring your hardware with Mobi Flight. That means like presets for accessing data from the sim or triggering the right input action. So yeah, let's say you want to flip a switch on the Boeing 737 from PMDG, then you can, we kind of have to look up some fancy codes or whatever to actually make that happen. And that is also not something that everyone would be able to do. So here we are sharing all this, and that makes it extremely easy for people to get started. And then last but not least, also, I think something I can really, really be proud of is our Discord or the support for the Mobi Flight project and by the Mobi Flight community, especially on the forum, which we had for so long. There's really great moderators, Pitzman and Stefan. And Discord channel is also, we have a great moderator team. Thanks to everyone. It's really like most of the times you ask a question and everyone is so responsive, and it's not only the dedication of the moderator team, but also everyone else on the Discord who is just there and sharing their progress, asking their questions, answering their questions. It's so much fun to see, and very, 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 very easy to get help. And then also some time flies. So it's going to be the 10th anniversary this year. So please celebrate with us. I also plan to really make a cool release this year, a new iteration of Mobi Flight. So looking forward to that. And maybe at this point, you ask yourself, hey, how do I actually get started with Mobi Flight? And that is really something very, very simple, because all you need beside Mobi Flight is a Mobi Flight compatible board. So this can be an Arduino 2560. That's the one that I recommend. It's really the very capable, and you can see the price. It's very, very affordable. And you see at the bottom of the screen, there's also other boards from the Arduino family, which is also open source, which is really nicely fitting together with Mobi Flight. And we have this new addition in the family of supported boards, which is the Raspberry Pi Pico. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this evolves, because we see that there is kind of like a trend, a change in this microcontroller ecosystem, that Raspberry Pi Pico is becoming very, very popular, and it's also very capable. And then beside the hardware where you can connect your buttons and your encoder switches and everything to it, there's the Mobi Flight connector tool that runs on your computer. You can have it, typically you let it run on the same computer where your flight sim is. You could also have it run somewhere on the network. That is also possible. And this is something that you can download from the website for free. Yeah, again, at no cost. And there's regularly updates for it, which are auto-distributed through the Mobi Flight software itself. So it's super easy to also stay up to date with the versions. And if you then have all this installed and you have your Arduino on the desk, I recommend to watch the tutorials on YouTube that really tell you how to get started. And with this, I guess I'm at the end of my part, and I hand it back over to Evan.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, guys. Great feedback. I've been watching and reading all the chats and seeing some of the different things that were shared over on the Mobi Flight channel. Phil says he saw himself on your map there, Sebastian, a minute ago. And just looking at Russ Barlow's channel here, Tony saying like just impressive stuff with those altimeters that you have going, Ron, and saying you just love to be able to do something like that. On the screen, you guys can see Jason's setup, what he calls his pride and joy that he's, I think, created using, I think he said Mobi Flight. Yep, Mobi Flight. 90% of the 737 cockpit is run with it, he says. And I'll bring up in just a second here, real Stack 55X running on Air Manager as well. So lots of good questions that I have. I'm going to roll right into those questions. Starting, if you can just very quickly, guys, we've given, just a bit of a sort of, I guess, taste as to each of your solutions. But if people want to take that next step and find more, can you just quickly remind us where everyone would go? Mark, we'll start with you. I think you might be muted, Mark. Oh,
His lips are moving.
Yeah, Mark, I think we got you muted.
There we go. Yeah, so I don't know if you're sharing that last slide of mine, but just go to stickandrudderstudios.com. There's links to a bunch of tutorial videos there, the demo videos. There's also links to all of our forums on explain.org where, there's lots of conversations going on, and also a link to our Discord server.
Perfect. Then I got that link up on the screen there for folks.
Yeah.
Russ,
So if you go there, you can get to everything else from there.
Perfect. And Russ, for you?
Yeah, pretty simple. siminnovations.com. There's a link there to the wiki, which, as I said, has just about everything you could want to know, and all that. You can download the programs. I said there's a demo. Actually, you just download the program and run it. It's limited till you register it. You can only run one panel, but you can get a feel for it. And there's also forums there, and of course those discords. And like I said, those simstrumentation. It's hard to say. Simstrumentation, like instrumentation, but change the N to an M and put an S in the front. Anyway, they did a fantastic job on those panels, and they're cranking them out. They're a very amazing group of guys, and that's all free too. So you can check that out, but I'd go to siminnovations.com for a starting point.
Perfect. Ron, I've already shipped your email once in the chat for someone who's asking for it, but tell us where people could find you other than Flight Sim Expo, of course.
Okay. Our website, altimetermotives.com, and it's all one word. And it's there on the screen. You can contact me directly by typing Ron at altimetermotives.com, and I'll get your email. And I'll try to answer it. Okay.
Perfect. And Sebastian, I know we just heard from you, but one more time, where do we find more about Mobi Flight?
Go to mobiflight.com. There you have access to all the different channels, touch points that I just mentioned. A lot of information is on GitHub, and for best community support, I really recommend the Discord and the forum.
Perfect. So some of these questions will be for one of you. Others are just kind of an open sort of free-for-all. So I'll start with one of those more open questions. Tony was asking about how these solutions impact frame rates. And so if you guys could talk to, do you see typically a frame rate impact from starting to add more hardware, or is it maybe the opposite? It's actually, offloading a little bit from the simulator. What have you guys experienced?
Well, I could speak for myself that, the instruments don't really take much bandwidth. The scenery screen is usually quite large, lots of pixels on the instrument panel. We're talking, 1920 by 1080. They don't move that fast compared to scenery. There's not very many pixels involved. It doesn't really load down the computer perceivably, and that's my experience.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same thing I find with mine. If you do some really large touch panels with lots of different fonts and you get really fancy, you might see, a 1 or 2 frame rate hit. But anything with the hardware, like the, X-Touch Mini or any of those things, you're not going to see anything at all. It's negligible.
Perfect.
Yeah. Same with Air Manager. No, of course, not really a difference, maybe a frame or 2 per second, but it does have the advantage you can run multiple computers, and a lot of guys like that last slide that showed that really complex Malibu. He runs a separate computer for the panel, and then runs the visual and the simulator model on a different computer. You can mix that up, so that's an advantage. If you can network that, you can offload and give all your power to the scenery, which usually uses most of it.
And Russ, if we can talk specifically with Air Manager and Air Player, when you're talking about doing that kind of networking, or you're talking about using a mobile device, is there a time delay that you find, or is Air Manager able to manage that sort of latency pretty well?
No, I've never perceived it. I don't think there. Yeah, if you're working, if you really want to be sure, put it on a hardwired, Ethernet connection. But no, not really not really any perceivable delay.
Great. I wanted to keep with the Air Manager theme now. Pizman82 on the Mobi Flight YouTube channel wanted to ask specifically about PMDG, saying that the displays are very difficult to read, but then if you undock the displays, it has a real big frame rate hit. So any thoughts for sort of those complex add-ons maybe where there is already a frame impact on how Air Manager might be able to help with that?
Well, I mean, if the problem is if you're going to undock Windows, you got to be hooked up to the same computer. So you can't use two computers to do that. Now, one interesting thing that's coming out in the next version of Air Manager for X-Plane only is you can stream those windows to another computer. It's actually encoding those and streaming them over your Ethernet or Wi-Fi to the other computer, and that gives some real advantages, because usually what they do, a lot of those panels you saw, they're putting a Air Manager panel with a hole in it, an opening, and behind that opening on the desktop you have the popped out panel from the simulator. Now you're going to be able to send that actually to the instrument, and it's going to have a canvas on there that gets the 2D instrument drawn on there, and that's really makes it much easier to manage, and you will be able to run it on a different computer. But there's still going to be some loss on the computer because it's still generating the image and having to stream it. So yeah, I mean, it's from my testing, it's about the same. It's just much more convenient. So I don't know the answer for PMDG. I haven't messed around with it that much, but I'm not sure what exactly is he talking about, the displays, the nav display.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And sort of wondering, I mean, the question, do you look at something like having your own app on a network the way that, say, ProSim does it or something like that, if that was something that Air Manager might one day support?
Well, yeah, if you were, it's quite a task to reprogram all that stuff, but it's certainly possible to do. I mean, that we have an Aspen that Ralph did that is very realistic, and some people have even upgraded that. The Malibu guy, Chuck, he did some real improvements on it, and it runs independently. So it's possible to do it, but it's quite a task.
Right. Okay. Good stuff. I'm going to move to some Mobi Flight questions now, and then we're going to come back. Actually, I might save some Mobi Flight questions now because I think we may have just lost Sebastian in the background. So I'm going to keep on with the question about the basically just the touch-enabled monitors, and anyone could take this. But Gary was wondering about recommendations or best sources for a touch-enabled monitor, which many of your solutions sort of talked about.
Yeah, I think I have I think it's a Planner. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, a Planner 22-inch. And I'm really happy with that one. You can find them on Amazon.
Yeah. Any other recommendations, maybe from you, Ron, on touch monitors?
I don't really use the touch monitors much because our panels have all the controls for it. But I could envision using Air Manager with a portrait mode iPad or such, where you could augment a left side panel with one of those for the radio functions. But I don't use touch screens. I sometimes touch things by mistakes or bump it, and that's why I crash when I land.
All right, Sebastian, I'm going to move to you. A couple Mobi Flight questions now. First of all, X-Plane support.
Yeah, we do have X-Plane support, and actually also we improved it a lot just last year. So you have access to X-Plane through their native data ref system, and also through the commands. That's really, really nice and makes it very easy and very similar now to configure. Like when you're already coming from Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, you might have seen that there is these nice presets, drop downs, and filter options, and you can all do.
Oh, we lost.
Oh no,
there he is. I think we might have lost.
Yeah, I just had a dropout of my internet connection just a couple of minutes before. So I just wanted to say, and it is very similar. I'm not sure what you heard, but the way that you're now working with X-Plane is very similar to the way it works for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, because you also have nice presets that you can choose from, drop downs and stuff, and really, really nice. A big improvement to what Mobi Flight had offered until 2021. Yeah.
And speaking of data ref, somebody had asked if MobiFlight supports proprietary and payware CMDs and data ref calls as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when you, for example, use Fly with Lua and you create custom commands there, you can just trigger those through MobiFlight too. So that's also, I know that there's currently one shortcoming, the holding down a button is not natively supported through their UDP interface, and it's a little bit technical now. And I didn't want to create an explicit or special plugin for X-Plane and MobiFlight because I thought it would be nicer to have it just work without anything that you have to install. But yeah, when you get to that point that you need a little bit more extensibility, then you can always use Fly with Lua, and you can put a lot of the logic that you might need for your specific plane then inside there. So that is currently a recommended approach for custom commands.
Mark, moving over to you now. A question from Mike wondering if we can expect an FS 2020 version of X-KeyPad. Obviously, we know X-KeyPad is X-Plane compatible, but any thoughts on Microsoft support?
Yeah, I'll certainly consider it. What I'd like to do, X-KeyPad's still relatively new, so I'd like to kind of see is just how popular it gets, and if it really gets a significant amount of traction, it isn't entirely feasible for me to make it so that it'll work on Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that question, Mike. And the question for anybody really on the call here, Tony over on Russ's channel is asking if it would be possible to basically put some servos on a chair and link them to pitch and roll. So I guess he's kind of talking about actually having the chair and the seat move in conjunction with the sim. What do you guys think about that?
Sure, it's possible. Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's not easy.
I mean, technically it's possible. The devil's in the details.
Yeah, that's true. I dropped again, but I just want to chime in on this because, yeah, it's not that easy. It's not so easy to calculate what you really have to have so that the sensations are, resembling really what you see in the sim is going to happen, what your body would experience. So it's not just reading some pitch and attitude information or whatever and drive the servos with that. It's a little bit more advanced and difficult.
Yeah, go ahead, Russ.
I went to Oshkosh, and there was a simulator there. I got in, and it was really fancy, and they were using X-Plane, and I got in it, and I rolled into a turn, and it kept the bank in there. It didn't wash it out, it didn't come out.
You need that.
And I feel like I'm hanging in a cross-controlled situation, hanging from the straps, and I'm saying, isn't this thing going to roll out? Well, these guys had never built a simulator before. They were a hydraulic company, but they said, well, we can do this. It looks simple. And they just were taking the bank angle, and they weren't realizing that in a coordinated turn, you don't feel that. The force is normal down your body. But that's what Sebastian's saying. It's not quite as straightforward as some people think.
Exactly.
Russell, a question for Air Manager now. So Nicholas is building or designing a 5-ton flight simulator with all the electronics. He says we have 4 Raspberry Pis controlling all the instruments and the USB interface, MPU Arduinos. What do you think about frame rates, delays? Is that going to be a problem over, using different AirPlayer servers over a network?
That's above my pay grade. I would get in touch with Corin at Sim Innovations and ask him, because I have no idea. It sounds pretty aggressive to me, but
well, I can answer this. It's
Okay.
down my alley. I
Okay.
was instrumental in the development of USB chips and so forth. And every one of your knobs, buttons, a mouse is so slow. The things that chew up bandwidth and CPU time end up being your video displays, and not so much the small ones like your GPS map. That's pretty small. It's your video that takes the bandwidth. As far as anything that a human does, touches, and the motors are also extremely slow on USB. So it's not a big load. It's the video, the data streaming, even much more so than audio. So I wouldn't worry about that. Today's processors are so overkill.
Yeah, that's true. I would like to second that, and really like exactly what you just said. Our human interactions are so slow. And you typically, like, how many hands do you have, right? I mean, how many switches can you flip at the same time?
Yeah.
And how many LEDs, or even in the state like the aircraft, if you have many LEDs, how much data changes at the same time? Obviously, when you have a display, there's a lot of more information that changes more regularly, but I would also assume Air Manager, when you have this Raspberry Pi integration, like all the performance that you need to render the screen happens on the Raspberry Pi, and you just exchange some of this data from your central computer. So it should be just fine.
You have to think that, you've got an array of satellite CPUs out there doing all of the switch debouncing and a lot of the other things that aren't done by the main CPU or causing traffic on USB. So it's really, you've got a lot of help out there with all these, and they're not trivial processors. Even an inexpensive ARM or a Raspberry Pico, these things are gargantuan by even 10 years ago, from the memory they have and the CPU horsepower they have.
I want to talk a little bit about virtual reality and sort of moving into what maybe is a bit of a trend here in home flight simulation. I'll start with a specific question, and then we'll talk maybe more broadly about it. But I think mostly for you, Russ, can Air Manager panels be integrated into virtual reality?
Well, first of all, the Knobster has there's two versions of the Knobster. Those guys, when we came up with the idea, it was my original idea, but because I was a pilot and I didn't want to use a mouse. It really bothered me. So I first took a regular mouse and put a knob on it and used that, because when you put the mouse over the knob, it had the scroll function. And we ended up evolving to the dual encoder because too many of those complicated knobs. But I guess the answer is you can't. What was the question?
We're asking about how you can interface Air Manager panels with a potential VR display.
So you can use. There's a little app that they wrote that works with the paid the official version. There's also a DIY version of the Knobster. These guys really believe in do it yourself. So we said we want to have a version that's based on Arduino, but when they built it, they didn't like Arduino. They wanted a true plug and play USB device. So they redesigned it, but it works the same. But when you have that version, you can go into either Microsoft Flight Simulator or X-Plane. There's two separate apps. You can pull up a screen and you can assign different functions to that knob. And that's one way you can do it. As far as using Air Manager itself in VR, it's really not that practical if you can't see the screen.
Mm-hmm.
You can still create buttons though, and the hardware capabilities of Air Managers are probably underappreciated because it came along later, and a lot of people use Mobi Flight because it's great. I mean, it's great and it's so easy to use that I can't blame them. They've already got things set up and they just display the instruments with Air Manager. They continue to use Mobi Flight for the hardware. That's fine. But if you start with the Air Manager, you can do that also. There's these little hardware functions that are extremely easy to use. There's just not that many of them because people aren't making them and contributing. But you could create a panel with switches that are dedicated. In fact, I made a little mouse. I use a trackball when I'm in VR because it's on my knee on a knee pad. It's easy to get to. And I created a little cradle with about 9 buttons around a kind of a U shape above it. And I could assign different functions. And I have it. So I think I have a video called Mighty Mouse or something. But you can touch the button and it'll tell you what it is, even in a voice. It'll say, heading select or whatever. And you can touch that and it still had the encoder there. So it had a dual push button encoder, but it had buttons to decide what the encoder was going to do. It's kind of like a workaround. But and that was all done with Air Manager. But I see the day in the future when we have pass-through video on our VR headsets, and we're going to be able to integrate a certain area of reality that could be the Air Manager panel or Ron's panel or something built with Mobi Flight, a regular physical panel, and then you incorporate it. And there's a great video online. I don't know where it is, but it's Lufthansa is using it for training with a Cirrus now, and it's really awesome. They've have a perfect looking panel, and that part comes through, and then kind of like almost like a green screen. The rest of the world is the VR, the super great VR like you get from, Microsoft Flight Simulator or something like that. And it's all knitted together in such a way that it's like the ultimate. You can see your hands, you can read charts, you can do everything you would do in an airplane very realistically. And they're using that Vario, which is like super high resolution, almost human eye resolution. They're very expensive, but that's going to get cheaper. And when that happens, I think that's where we're all going eventually, is to a VR kind of mixed reality kind of simming.
Yeah. Evan, if I could just add on to that a little bit. I have a number of X-KeyPad users in X-Plane that they do small virtual device panels, with that little soft number pad on it, and they'll put keys on there for the radios and the autopilot and stuff like that. And those windows can show up in your VR environment. So they'll create it and they'll just move it off to the side, over by the co-pilot seat or whatever. So it's a little easier to get the radios tuned up or the transponder and that stuff, rather than trying to, fight with the encoders with the VR controllers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do wonder, what you guys think, if you just kind of as a maybe closing thought here, what do we think about virtual reality? All of you are very obviously hardware focused. The other end of the spectrum is we're getting rid of all this hardware and we're just going to be wearing goggles. So if you guys wanted to comment on that just as we wrap up.
I don't know. I'm kind of wondering if they're ever going to get to the point where gloves are really working right and you have the feedback on them. I just don't think it's there yet.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it, and I also I have one just to also try and understand how this could work together with actual physical hardware, because as we just also heard from Russ, I think the ultimate experience is going to be when you really combine it nicely, when you can see the switches and your physical devices mixed together with the virtual reality. That's going to be really cool. And if we can make that work, I think it's going to be huge. At the moment, though, even though, for example, it's called Windows Mixed Reality, and I had kind of some expectations in my head that were definitely not fulfilled by the current technology, but eventually I'm pretty sure we're getting there. I mean, it would totally make sense.
Well, I was contacted by someone that was developing an virtual reality, and they were interested in having a panel that worked with the virtual reality, which I imagine would involve identifying where the physical placement of it is, so that it could sync up with the virtual reality display. But I think Russ hit it with the augmented reality is probably the best of both worlds, where you do have something physically. You do want to touch the control, and you do want to have the tactile field of touching it, which augmented reality would give you that aspect that's missing in a pure glove controlled environment, I think.
All right, guys, I think that probably wraps it up. Anything that you wanted to share just before we close out this afternoon? A great presentation, lots of great thank yous and feedback from the chat. So I appreciate your answers and your time with us this afternoon. Anything else that you'd like to say just as we close things off here?
I'd like to say...
Sorry, you go first.
I knew somebody was going to step on somebody. I love just throwing that out.
I was just going to say thank you to Evan, because I really appreciate, being a real sim enthusiast. I really appreciate what FSA does. The not only the expo, which is fantastic, and I would encourage anyone who can get to Houston to go, because you can watch stuff on YouTube. It's just not the same. It's really exciting being around a bunch of guys who have the same enthusiasm for this hobby, and to see you see stuff that you're never going to see any other time, because this stuff doesn't come around from city to city. So I appreciate these seminars, the webinars. I try not to miss them, because you learn so much, and thank you for that. I really do appreciate it.
Russ?
Yeah, same here. Thanks, Evan. Just one thing that I would like to mention is that Captain Bob and I were going to be at the expo. And we're also going to offer some interactive workshops that you will be able to sign up for. That's going to be probably a lot of fun. And then I hope that we can meet there also in person and exchange some of ideas, because I believe that also here, like the four of us, we could definitely collaborate on some of the topics more closely. So a lot of synergies that I'm seeing there, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think we've kind of loosely talked about doing, version 2 of this panel maybe in person where you can actually sit beside each other as opposed to in boxes on the screen. So I think that would be a lot of fun. And if
Yeah, it
people
would
kind of
be.
think that would be interesting, if you have ideas for what a potential, second version of this panel could be, questions that you'd like these guys to answer, send those our way, pop them in the chat, send me an email, send me a DM, and of course, we'd be happy to hear any other ideas, as we're always looking for thoughts and new ways to, of course, just keep expanding the show. And speaking of which, I think it's a good time to talk about in about an hour and a half from now. I'm going to go grab a quick lunch, and then we're back live with FS Elite revealing our 2023 exhibitors. Of course, we revealed one already. Ron let the cat out of the bag, I guess, a little bit and said he'll be there. That's okay. But we'll be revealing all 49 plus others at about 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Central, 21 Zulu in about an hour and a half from now. So join us on YouTube for that. Thanks again to the panel for a great discussion, to the chat for your comments, contributions, and pictures. And if those of you who are joining us on YouTube, we'll see you about an hour and a half. If not, of course, we'll hopefully see you in Houston for Flight Sim Expo. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.